Summer is well and truly over. Just look at that sky behind me. It's grey, it's overcast. It's probably going to rain any minute now. But all this bad weather doesn't mean the end of my landscape photography. Oh no. Do you know what time it is now? Yep, it's time to embrace the grey once again. Welcome to the South Devon coast. I'm just on the opposite side of the bank from Teignmouth over there. And in case you've not seen one of my Embrace the Grey videos before, it's all about embracing that grey, overcast weather there by finding the right subject to photograph for these types of conditions. And I think I found just the subject I need to photograph there. I've never photographed it before, so you're joining me for the first time as well. And I'm quite excited about it. I think it could make for a good long exposure. Why don't we take a look? Okay, so my subject tonight is this little, I guess it's a mini lighthouse, it's a harbour light. It's called the Philip Lucette Light, as I read the sign down there. Yeah, it's real interesting. It's like a little mini lighthouse. I'm not sure if the light comes on, because like I say, I've never been here, but I assume it comes on at some point. But I think it sits out in the sea, it's high tide, so it's isolated from the rest of the beach now. So I think by creating a long exposure, sort of minimalistic shot, I think it could work quite well for a bit of Embrace the Grey. If not, I've got out to got out and did some photography anyway. Sometimes you just got to go out there, do a little bit of experimentation and see what happens. Okay, first thing I'm going to talk about is tripod height and how this impacts the composition. So I'll kind of duck down just so you can see how low my tripod is. It's not anywhere near fully extended. This is because I want the camera height quite low down, so it puts the top of the lighthouse clearly above the horizon. I didn't want it on the horizon, or I didn't want it just a little bit above or a little bit below. I want it purposely above the horizon for this particular composition. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is the lens. Now I've got my 24 to 200 lens on, so I've got quite a lot of reach. Now if I zoom all the way out to 200, I can get the lighthouse almost completely in the frame. It still leaves me a little bit of space around the edge, but I've taken a couple of test shots for that. I don't really like it as much. I don't think it's as interesting. So I put the camera in a landscape orientation and I've zoomed quite a bit further out. This is because there's quite a lot of space from this particular spot where I'm standing, so I can get a lot of empty space either side of the lighthouse, and this for me helps create a sense of isolation for the subject in the sea, which I think is going to work a lot better than a much tighter composition. Okay, with the composition setup, let me talk quickly about a couple of the technical bits of setup for the camera. So I've got an f8, I don't need a lot of aperture because the only subject I've got is that little lighthouse. I've got a manual exposure. I put a 10-stop neutral density filter in because I want an exposure of at least a few minutes, because I really want to smooth out all the sea, smooth out all the sky, and really help with that sense of isolation. I'm using my circular polarizer. I almost forgot to say there, that's just to control some of the reflections off the sea and darken that down a bit and add a bit of mood. So that's the camera setup, composition setup. Let's take the picture. Okay, that's me got my image. Do you know what? I've no idea whether it really works or not. But at the end of the day, I did something, I came out, I got my camera out, I practiced my photography, less than optimal conditions, but the point was I gave it a go, and that's always the most important thing, get out with your camera. But that's not the end of this video. No, if you want to hang around for a bit longer, you can join me back home where we'll process the image and do the most important thing, which is to make a print. I'll leave my final judgment on this photograph until I've made a print. Well, I just noticed that the little red light is on in the lighthouse, so I think it's time to go. Hello and welcome back. So we're going to do two things now. We're going to process that image and we're of course going to make a print. So just a quick word on processing. I've already done videos on post-processing and Lightroom catalog management. So if you want to know in a bit more detail how I manage those two aspects of my post-processing, I'll include links for those in the video description below. And of course, with any post-processing technique, what I show you might not be the only way to do something. So I'm not suggesting this is the way you have to do it. I'm just showing you the way that I happen to do it. Now, with all that said, why don't we take a look at those images and start our post-processing. Okay, let's take a look at the two images that I've processed. We're actually only going to look at one, how I processed one of them, but I just thought I'd show you, I did get a couple of images and why I've picked one over the other. Really, for me, it's all about the colors and the light and the tide height, really. So if we look at the top image here, we can see there's a bit more of the lighthouse is visible here. I'm not so keen in that. And also, I think I prefer the kind of bluey mood of this one. And while I could have retrospectively done that to the top one as well, what really makes this image for me is actually the light at the top of the lighthouse is on. So this is one of the images that's been taken at a later date. So for those reasons, I'm going to stick to processing this one. Okay, so here we've got the two images. So the image on the left is the final product, and the image on the right is the original raw file. So what I'm going to do is going to take you through all the settings, or most of the settings that I've done in Lightroom to get from that image on the right to the image on the left. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to crop the image. As I said when I was out on location, I wanted to create a sense of isolation. So now that I've got back here, I really feel that a panoramic crop is going to help give that sense of isolation. And now I'm going to use a crop 6:17 because the paper that I'm going to actually make the print on has an aspect ratio of 6:17. So I'm going to crop it to match the paper. So I've already got a custom ratio done here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to line up the middle of the lighthouse there. I'm going to put that down a bit closer to the horizon there, about there. Okay, so now I know which parts of the image I'm going to edit. I'm going to bring up the exposure. As you can see, the histogram here is a bit bunched to the left. So I'm just going to give it, yeah, I think about there will be absolutely fine. Now, what I will say is I'm going through some of these settings, and you may be wondering why I'm doing this or why I'm dragging the highlights and pulling the whites. A lot of these decisions are quite, I guess, artistic and personal choices. There's no kind of technical reason or right or wrong way because I've picked these settings. It's trying to create a mood in the image that I want to create. So just bear that in mind, that sometimes it doesn't have to be a real reason why you want to change a setting. It's just you want to change the look of the image to give you a certain feel. Because of the contrast in the image, it's saturated the colors a little bit. Now I want to desaturate the colors a little bit. So I'm going to pull these quite a bit back just to give them a slightly more natural feel. I think there's going to be good. So that's the very basics done now. Now I'm going to do some masking, and I'm going to adjust certain areas of the image. Now the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to do a grad for the sky because I want to add a bit of dehaze, or I should say add more haze in this instance. So as my grad, I'm going to put on a luminance mask, and I'm going to show you that. I'm going to try and get rid of much of the lighthouse as possible, as you can see there, by moving the white to the left. But it's never quite 100%, so what I'm going to do is zoom in, I'm going to use a brush, and I'm going to erase the rest of the mask. Now, with most of this brushing that I'm going to show you, I'm going to do it quite quickly. Obviously, when you're doing it yourself, you're going to spend a bit more time. I'm going to be a bit more careful. So I'm just going to rub that out. As you can see, the red's starting to disappear. I'm doing this very, very quickly. Right. So that means any of the adjustments I now make won't impact the lighthouse. So if I zoom back out, I'm going to switch off showing the mask. I'm going to get the dehaze, and I'm just going to drag it to the left. So this actually makes the sky a bit more hazy, which is going to suit the mood for my image. About there, it will do nicely. And now I'm going to do exactly the same for the water. I want to kind of use the dehaze to the left to make it look a bit more ethereal and match the kind of tones and the texture of the sky, or the lack of texture in the sky, really. I'm going to drag that up there like that. Actually, that needs to come down a bit here. And again, I'm going to use the brush, and I'm just going to paint out the lighthouse, put the mask on so I can see what I'm doing. Oh, I mean, put that in erase. Again, doing this super quickly, so I do normally take a bit more time. There we go. That's pretty rough, but that will do. Switch off the mask again, and again, if I zoom out, I'm just going to dehaze to the left. And as you can see, that's starting to match the tone of the sky a bit better. I think it gives me a more uniform hazy feel. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some minor adjustments just to the lighthouse. I mean, it's pretty well the only object that is actually in focus, and it is obviously the main focus of the image. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tweaking to the lighthouse. Now I'm going to do that by doing a brush. I'm going to paint in my adjustments. So I'm going to go in, I've got it on plus. I'm going to switch on the mask so I can see what I'm doing. So again, super quick. I would normally take a lot more time over this. Paint that in. That's that done. Switch the mask off. Because of the other adjustments I've made to the image, the lighthouse is actually looking a little bit cool. So I'm going to push the white balance slightly, make it slightly warmer, just to bring out some of the whiteness in the lighthouse. So I'm going to put the temperature up a little bit. There we go. Actually, if we zoom out, we can see that a bit better. Give it a quick dab of exposure, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of sharpness. And all that will help the lighthouse stand out from the rest of the image. And I think finally, I'm just going to add a little bit of a vignette. Now that's all the kind of adjustments made to the image. There's a couple of other things I want to do, or one major other thing, and that's to actually go in and remove some objects from this image. So the objects that I'm talking about in this instance are these kind of boys out here that have been moving about during the long exposure. I'm just going to use a spot removal tool and just remove those off. And I'll just go through the image and tidy up the rest of those objects that happen to be floating about in the water. And after I've done all that, that's really about it. That's all I need to do to this image. Now, one of the things that I could do that I have tried and I'm not going to do actually, is if you look closely at the image, obviously there's quite a bit of dirt on this lighthouse. I have gone into Photoshop to try and remove some of it, and I was somewhat successful, but it's a bit beyond my skill range, particularly up at this top area here. So I'm just going to leave it as is. That's what the lighthouse looked like. I'm sure if there are probably more skilled Photoshop experts out there that could probably tidy that up. But for me, you know, I'm not submitting this image to a competition. This is for me, it's just a bit of fun. It's got me out shooting. So I'm not too bothered that it's not absolutely perfect. So we'll just have one last check through the image. I would had more time, I'd go through and remove all these, but I'm not going to bore you with that. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. The only thing we need to do now is to actually create the print. Right, my favorite bit of the entire process, and that is of course making a print. Now I've done quite a few videos on printing. If you want to check out some of those, I'll include a link for a playlist in the video description below as well. Now, similar to post-processing, there are different ways to print your image. I happen to use Canon's Print Studio Pro software that came with my Canon Pixma Pro 10S printer. But of course, you'll get very similar results if you go through either the Lightroom interface or the Photoshop interface. But like I say, I just happen to use Print Studio Pro, and that's what we're going to jump into now. So I'll just open that up. There's my final image. Okay, the first thing I need to do is change the aspect ratio. I've got something here already. I'm using Photospeed's panoramic paper, so it's already cut to a panoramic ratio. So I've already got that predefined in Print Studio Pro. I'm just going to go into layout and I'm going to center that image. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, get near to the edges, about there. Okay, so I've got my paper size set up and the image size set correctly. I just need to tell Print Studio Pro what paper I'm going to use, and I'm going to be using a matte paper, so I'm going to select matte photo paper, and I'm going to be using platinum etching. Now I already have a custom profile for that. If you want to know how I do my custom profiles or how I get my custom profiles made so the paper matches the printer and the print ink combination, that will be in that video playlist that I mentioned before, all on printing. So now that that's all set up, just do a quick double check. I'm going to put the print quality on high, rear tray, panoramic set, I've got the correct color profile, got matte paper selected because it is a matte paper, all the layouts correct. Just need to hit print and wait for the magic to happen. Okay, the print has been made and here it is. I have to move out of the way because it's a bit of a big print. So let's talk about the image. So is it a good image? Well, this is kind of the point of this video. the fact that whether it's a good image or not is actually largely irrelevant. And I kind of like it. I kind of things I dislike about it. There's kind of things I like about it, and I'm kind of the ratio between like and dislike kind of varies depending on when I'm looking at the image. Which is one of the good things about printing your images, is that you do spend more time looking at your photographs, and you do spot more things, and it can really help your development as a photographer. But that aside, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't enter this image into any sort of competitions on that. I think the fact that the lighthouse is quite dirty, and I wasn't unable to sort of clean that up, it's not going to do very well in that essence. But that's not really the point. The point is that when you go out and take photographs, it's not really to go out there with the intention of creating a masterpiece every single time. Sometimes it's just fun to go out with the camera, like I did, and go to a new location, do a little bit of experimentation, do a little long exposure, try something a bit different aspect ratio, print it off. It's about having fun with your photography. And particularly when you're dealing with sort of grey and overcast conditions, it's even sometimes harder to get a really good image. So the message I kind of wanted to get across in this video is that it doesn't matter whether that's a great image or good image or a bad image, or whether you like it or whether I like it. It doesn't really matter. The message I want to really give you there is just get out your camera and have fun with it, because the more fun you have with the camera, the more times you'll go out with it, and the better your photography will become, so that when you do get conditions or you do find a scene that you're really excited about, you'll be in a much better position to make the most of that. Okay, I really hope this video has inspired you to get out there with your camera. So even if it is a grey and overcast day, remember to embrace the grey, and don't worry that the shots that you get might not be a masterpiece. You can't go out there all the time and create 5-star images. Go out there principally to enjoy your photography and to do something creative. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, remember to click and like, leave me a comment, share it, all that good stuff. And if you're not a subscriber, click on the subscribe button as well. But until the next video, I shall see you then.